Olivia, thanks for joining me today under difficult circumstances once again. It's a bit of a shame that we couldn't have got into the studio for this like we originally planned, but we're here, albeit via Zoom. So thanks for joining me, and really nice to meet you virtually. Now, a lot of this podcast is going to be around Olivia's amazing and inspiring documentary that she filmed and produced and directed and recorded the sound and God knows what not, called Resurfacing. Now, Resurfacing is the story of Andy Murray's rehab that spans 2 years. Is that right, Olivia? Sort of starting in 2018 and...
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's probably just 50 years, actually.
This was Olivia's debut feature. So this is no mean feat, a massive project to go straight into. And that is what really inspired me to get you on, Olivia. So given that we are in another lockdown, just to start things off, why don't you, because like we were saying off air, I've been getting into this whole well-being thing a little bit late, considering like hopefully this is the last ever lockdown, but I'm on my smoothie diet. So what about you? What are you doing during this lockdown in terms of maintaining your well-being?
I think I'm trying to avoid planning too much. I think everyone, I don't know, it was probably different for everyone, but in the first lockdown, I was like, right, I'm going to have a routine for my day and I'm going to have breaks. And even though I actually wasn't working at the time, I think I furloughed myself for the first few months because the whole world sort of shut down, or at least Britain did. I set this routine out for myself. I was going to do, an hour of reading, an hour of exercise, etc., etc. But actually it made the days feel really long and I sort of lost all spontaneity. And so I think irregularity at the moment is quite exciting and just going with the flow. And obviously if you've got work to do, you've got that to do, but just trying to not make anything seem too monotonous because it just gets a bit grim otherwise.
And that's very difficult at the moment to mix things up, isn't it? Because it's literally Groundhog Day, but we can only try.
I'm talking like working from a different room and sitting on the other end of the table and I don't know, just sort of not overthinking anything, I think, or thinking that, I should be doing this, or wondering when it's going to end. It will end when it will end, and you've just got to go with it and get your head down until then, don't you?
And something that I've found that's working for me quite well at the moment is that, apart from the whole smoothie thing, is that I've set myself a goal to call a friend once every few days, I guess, like a lot of people, I was probably a bit slack last year with keeping in touch with people just because of just the year that we all had. But it's actually been really nice to catch up with some friends that I haven't spoken to for a long time, and getting into the routine of that I've found has helped me a little bit. The only thing I'm finding now is that I'm starting to run out of friends to call. And we've only been in lockdown a couple of weeks, so that's not great. But anything.
No, that's lovely. That's lovely. I mean, you just call them again, no? Not that much happens in a few weeks, but
just checking in.
Just checking in again. I'm trying to do a book a week, which is tough actually, because you have to be in the right headspace, I think. I'm 1 week through, so I'll let you know how that goes.
Keep me posted.
Now,
before we go into the making of the Resurfacing documentary about Andy Murray, give us a bit of background then. Like, how did you first get into filmmaking and the whole creative world?
So me and a group of friends decided that we'd essentially start a bit of a platform. It was like a media blog ahead of the general election in 2015, to try and engage first-time voters using video. And the idea was that it was meant to be non-partisan, and it went quite well, actually. And I think there was an appetite for it. There was, enough of an appetite that we actually secured some funding, and that's how Seams of Reason, the company that I'm part of, started. So it was a video blog, and it just sort of rolled on from there. And then we started getting commissions for schools and educational campaigns. And then in 2016, we decided to crowdfund our first documentary. It was a short form documentary about surveillance in the UK, because we thought a lot of young people needed to understand how their data was being used. And then it just snowballed from there. And then that led me on to documentary with Andy, because he was in my life at the time, through a personal connection. Yeah.
That's quite an interesting journey. So we've gone from sort of like the whole, the whole voting thing, political side of things with which is interesting, in its own right, but you've gone from that to Andy Murray. So that's kind of quite an interesting transition there. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about, like, how did that, the documentary with Andy, how did it come around?
Yeah, sure. So I knew him personally, and he was always quite intrigued by what the hell I was doing. And when he got injured, so it was the summer of 2017, we decided at the end of that year to have a surgery. And he thought it would be really interesting for fans to see what it was like for a top athlete. And we're talking about a guy that was #1 tennis player in the world, to undergo an extensive surgery and try and come back from that. And the time frame that he was given was that he'd be back on court, hopefully playing within 6 months of having the surgery. And he thought, do you know what? I'm gonna make the most of this whole journey and share this story with my fans. And it was only meant to be like I don't know, we were thinking about putting it out on YouTube for free for people to watch, or as a Facebook video, because Facebook have their own platform now for those sorts of things. And he basically turned around to me. He knew that I knew how to operate a camera. He trusted me, even though at the time I didn't know him that well, because even though we'd been in each other's lives, he was always on tour and I was closer with the rest of his family. But he asked if I was interested, and I just thought it was a really interesting opportunity. Knew nothing about tennis. I wasn't a tennis fan, which was awful.
Was that a stumbling block, though, the fact that you didn't know a lot about tennis, or did it not really have an impact on things?
It meant that I worked harder to understand his world. And also I was able to approach the film from someone who didn't know anything about it. And I wanted the film to appeal to people that didn't know anything about tennis, was just interested in a very human, emotional, sport-led story.
Yeah.
And that drove me throughout, and that served me, because that's been one of the remarks that people have made, and I'm really proud of that. So I think it helped.
Yeah. And I remember when we spoke before on the phone, and you kind of said during the early days, it was just a case of compiling a bit of footage of Andy and just doing it ad hoc, so to speak. But one of the things I wanted to ask you was there like a specific moment that you can remember where you thought, hold on a minute here, I can actually turn this into like a feature length documentary that could get distribution. It could be, it could end up on Netflix or Amazon Prime. Was there a moment where it kind of changed for you?
Yes. So about 3 months into filming, Andy hit a bump in the road, and I realized that his journey, or his comeback story, was going to take far longer than 6 months. And I mean, it's not even in the film, but he broke down in front of the camera, in front of me at that point as well. And it was the first time that I could see just how much this all meant to him, how much it was taking a toll on him. And that was immediately a story that needed to be told, because this was a man who had been completely misunderstood consistently in our country. And it changed, it had changed drastically up until that point, but not significantly, because he didn't care about altering the personality that had been presented, which I admired him for greatly, but I was also quite frustrated by the fact that people weren't getting to see what I was getting to see. And we just decided basically to continue filming until, you know, his journey or what he was going through, you know, reached some kind of conclusion, whether that was negatively, positively, or non-conclusive. You know, we just thought we'd just keep rolling.
And how did that open-ended type of nature to this project, not knowing when it was going to end, like how did that affect your approach to making it? Because normally when you shoot a film, you know where it's going to start, you know the midpoint, you know how it's going to end, and then you know that you can start post-production pretty soon after. So how did that change your, you know, the open-ended nature of it? How did that affect things?
I absolutely loved not being constrained by a timeline. And that was about 3 months into filming, I realized it needed to be a feature-length film, and it couldn't be shorter than that. About 6 months into filming, I realized that I needed a producer who knew the hell what they were doing and could help elevate and amplify this and, you know, give it the justice that it deserves in terms of positioning and marketing and whatever. And I knew that I needed to find a producer that would let me just keep going and not bind me to anything concrete. And obviously you have to create a whole budget, etc. But John Batsek, the brilliant man that he is, just said, just keep going. I'm not even gonna engage with you on this until you need me or want me as a sounding board. Just keep shooting, which was brilliant.
And that must have been really sort of comforting as well, to have that support and know that, you know, you're 3 months in and what you've done in those 3 months is clearly working. And at the end of the day, I guess it was just you and Andy for the most point. So that was good sort of a good sort of insight from the producer to think, hold on, I don't want to just, you know, get right in the middle of these two and disrupt the flow. So no, that's really interesting to hear. So, I mean, from your perspective as the filmmaker, I mean, what were some of the key challenges that you faced when it came to making the documentary and finally getting it out there?
So, as you mentioned at the beginning, and as anyone could probably figure out if they looked closely enough at the film, I shot the whole film myself and sound recorded the whole film myself. There are obviously a few interviews, like with the big dogs, Federer, but again, you know, there was only one, maybe two other person in the room. The majority was led by me, and that is a minefield to get your head around, because you're dealing with, you know, multiple batteries, multiple memory cards. You know, you also want to back yourself up. So if you're in the middle of a really important scene or conversation and something's unfolding in front of your eyes, you've got to make sure that, God forbid, your camera cuts out, you've at least got the audio going, and you never know what the audio is going to be affected by. So you've got to have, like, you know, 6 or 7 mics all in different places, because people are you see the film, like, the team are consistently moving around. There's literally nothing that's been set up. I could not ask anyone to stand where I wanted to, and I didn't actually want to, because that would also mean that they become aware of the filming environment.
It would take away from the moment, wouldn't it?
Exactly. And they're very, you know, these are very normal people that aren't used to having a camera in their face, even though they got used to me after a while. I never wanted them to be aware that I was there. So I was constantly having to maneuver things around. And as I said to you before, I was just on the floor, scurrying around like a rat. Obviously having to pay attention as well, and trying to, where I could or where it was appropriate, lead the conversation in certain ways, or dig deeper, or get things to be repeated if it wasn't clear enough, because it was fueled by just tennis jargon that no one could get their head around.
Yeah.
So there was a lot going on, but but as I said to you as well before, the film would not be what it is if there was even one more person with Andy or the team. And so I'm grateful anyway that Andy and the team let me in as much as they did. But I'm also even more grateful that I was allowed to not seem professional because I couldn't when there's that much to deal with, you know what I mean? And it'd be fine and it'd be funny and it'd just be a bit slapdash, but we just got away with it basically.
Yeah. And what did you shoot it on? What was the camera?
So I shot it on a Red Raven, which is the smallest edition, and it was brilliant. I mean, I cannot commend the hardware of Red enough. It was amazing, and I had multiple lenses and things that saved my life were those ND filters that you screw on to the top that saved me in so many situations when having to deal with weather. Sound, I got a Zoom H4 that's got 4 different ports and a mic on top, and then I had a mic on the camera and a separate mic on the stand as well. That all fed in.
That is just pure multitasking, Olivia. That is, I mean, talk about a baptism of fire.
Yeah, but I didn't do it graciously. I can't explain how funny it was at times.
And you were saying just before we sort of went into it that Andy was having a bit of a laugh at this as well, wasn't he? About you sort of scurrying around and dealing with all the kit.
Oh yeah, so he would be in the scene where he's talking to his therapist before he's about to play potentially his final match at the Australian Open. Because he was, there was very high chance that he, was going to retire then. He was talking to his therapist and it was a really deep conversation about this dream that he had that, basically showed that in his mind he lost control of his life, and it was all about this car that he couldn't control. And this therapist was on the other end of the phone just going, yeah, okay, tell me more, let's discuss what you're feeling. And actually he was just pissing himself because I was scurrying around trying to get the mic in the right position and the lighting subtle enough that it felt like he was really in his own cocoon.
Yeah. And just sticking with the Australian Open in 2019 then, I mean, when I first watched the documentary, I think one of the most fascinating sort of segments of the film was the bit that you just described actually, and the press conference that Andy went into where he's talking to you on camera just before the press conference. And when I was watching it, I was kind of thinking, I don't know Andy at all personally, but you could just tell that he was so undecided as to what he wanted to do. And he almost had a bit of a cheeky smirk, a cheeky grin at the same time, as in I'm not going to do the impression of Andy, obviously, but I might call it a day. I might make this announcement, but I don't know, is it the right thing to do? I mean, at that moment, how did you feel from a personal perspective, because you got to know him so well, and also what were you thinking in terms of was this the kind of the potentially the end point of the film? If that was it, the Australian Open, I guess that would have been production wrapped and then you go on to post. How were you feeling at that point?
I was wetting myself behind camera because it's my favorite point in the movie because I remember it so vividly. I didn't know whether to turn the camera off and just have an honest conversation with him as a person, because I did feel in that moment like I was exploiting him when he was at his most vulnerable. But at the same time, I think he wanted to talk to someone, and also I didn't want him to regret not being able to look back on himself at that point making the decision. And that's one of the biggest conflicts that you have when you're filming a documentary, and it's so raw and visceral, is that you feel like you're taking advantage, but at the same time you hope that one day your subject is going to be really grateful that you were there and captured it. So I was conflicted in that sense, but pissing myself because he was like a child that couldn't make his mind up about some like which pair of shoes to have, and he was just so funny in that moment, and so torn as well. He literally did not know what to do, and it was, there was just crowd of people, because like all of the British media and all of the Australian media were waiting in a room for him, and just that pressure as well. And also there was a part of me that kind of wanted it to be done for his sake, and it's it's the biggest difference between a sports person, man or woman, like him, and someone like me, because I would have given up months ago, because what you don't see in the film, that there were actually 3 or 4 more times that he was really close to calling it a day, and no one would have batted an eyelid because of what he was putting himself through emotionally, physically. And I was almost desperate for it to be done.
Right.
But I knew as well that it would not be. Absolutely not.
But obviously, like, as a tennis fan myself, I know that Andy is an emotional guy. And the film is a real roller coaster, because it's constantly up and down. Oh, he's gone back into surgery. We don't know how he's going to pull up after it. Or this could be the turning point. He could be back on court soon and be winning tournaments and so on. But given the fact that he is quite an emotional guy, like, how did that impact on you? Like, because obviously you spent so much time with him that, you're not a robot, Olivia. Surely, like, seeing him break down and cry must have affected you as a director. How did it, could you sum that up as to how his emotions affected you during the making of the film?
That's a really lovely question. It did really affect me, and I also felt quite guilty about it, because I had to keep reminding myself that this was a film about tennis. And I was so, but at the same time, being with Andy, you realize that it's not. And it's like, how do you show that in a way that isn't just showing a man on camera crying? How do you tell what this sport means to him in 90 minutes? Like, are you kidding me? His whole life. Like, how do you do that?
Well, you did it, to be fair, Olivia.
Well, thank you very much. That's probably the biggest compliment that someone could pay me, because how do you justify those tears?
The thing is that I watched the doc. I've seen it a couple of times now, and you can just tell just how much the game means to him. And it's not just a case of hitting a ball over a net. This is a legacy. This is someone that's been lauded, as the first British man since Fred Perry and all that. I mean, that's brilliant, but he's well beyond that as an athlete as well. But by the end of it, I felt I understood what it meant, and to have to walk away from that sport when your mind is still willing and you've still got so much in the tank mentally, maybe in tennis terms, but then to have that thought of having to give it up because of an injury must have just been, that's what I got from it anyway. I understood that. I felt that from Andy. And in terms of sticking with the whole emotion kind of side of things, did you ever kind of doubt yourself at any stage? Did you ever have kind of ups and downs within yourself during the making of it? Because it did span quite a long time. So, and it was your debut film as well in terms of a feature. So,
I mean, all the time. There was not a day that I didn't have to, like, when I woke up in the morning, go, come on, you can do this. Because I was terrified I was going to screw it up for him, not even me. Like, doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter if I mess something up or if he can't make it happen or whatever.
Yeah.
But this was his story, and I just wanted to be taken seriously as well. But how could I be? Because I'd never done it before. But I think I think what got me through was the support I had from the team, because I was so committed to the project. I mean, there was not a day pretty much that I was not there filming like every hour of every day, because as you said before, we had no idea when the turning point was going to be, and I couldn't miss it. So I think when they saw how committed I was, they gave me the support I needed. And then that whole environment convinced all of the people who were sitting on the sidelines that this was actually something quite special. And I mean, I like broke a few fundamental rules when it comes to filmmaking, for the sake of winning over the team and doing what I thought was necessary. And thankfully it paid off. Like one of the, it was I don't even know if I can tell you this. Okay, I won't say who it is. It was a member of the team who didn't really want to be on camera. Fair enough. Like, you just have, you know, it wasn't about him. It was about his client, who was Andy. And he thought that, you know, I was potentially going to manipulate the footage just for the sake of drama, which, you know, at some point you've got to manipulate some things to make it dramatic and engaging for your audience. There was no,
for sure. Yeah.
But obviously, you know, there have been some instances that's, you know, affected people, the subjects, negatively. And that might be for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, but still, that was his impression of documentary making. And so I told him that he wouldn't have to sign his consent release form until after the film was finished, which is a massive no-no. I mean, like, absolutely. Like, when I told members of my team, I mean, they had their heads in their hands. Like, so, like, you know, could you imagine if he turned around and said, I don't want to do this? But I knew I had absolutely no intention of making anyone look bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are the obstacles that we all have to go through. I mean, I could tell you a few stories about when I made that House and Garage documentary years ago about consent forms, and then people turning around at the end of it saying, oh, no, I'm not happy with this. But at the end of the day, you sign the form, mate. There's nothing I can do. And it's just, that's the side of things that I guess, you know, non-filmmakers just don't really appreciate.
No, exactly.
But just moving forward onto the sort of like the post-production of the film, I mean, you must have accumulated some serious hours of footage here. So tell me in general, what was post like for you? Was it, I'm guessing it was a headache or two?
Such a headache. Because as well, bless, our edit assistant he had help on this as well. He had to sync all of the audio with the footage for 2 years, 2 years worth of footage in the end, which is hundreds and hundreds of hours. I mean, the storage facility that they had to get for all of this footage. And
coming off a Red as well. That's some serious heavyweight footage.
Exactly. Yeah, and there was, you know, so many things we had to get tweaked. So much of the audio wasn't great. I mean, I have not watched the film back since I had to sit in the screening room on the premiere night. I didn't even watch it, and I was watching Andy's facial expressions the whole time. If I can't listen to it back, because I can hear how awful some of the sound is in parts. So I mean, yeah, that was a headache, but you just get through it. And that's the beautiful thing about documentary, is that you can, well, hopefully you can get away with it being slightly imperfect because it's real. And I had a great team. Like my editor was brilliant. He let me, you know, creatively do what I wanted to do, which I think is really unique for someone coming in as first time director of a feature film. And I really feel.
Were you sat next to the editor, like literally 24/7 then, or was it just a case of like, this is roughly what I want this scene to look like, cut it together and just send it over sort of thing? Like, how was your relationship with the editor?
No, I mean, I was like obsessed with it. I think I was an absolute nightmare to be in the room. I was just sat next to him. And also because I've been working as part of an indie production house in Seams of Reason where we do everything ourselves, and I normally edit a lot of things myself. I mean, I had to just sit there like twiddling my thumbs. Obviously I didn't, we were using Avid. I've never used Avid before, so I couldn't even work it really. I tried to make some selects a few times, and it was so not intuitive. Please, can they just sort that out? But I get it. It's the most reliable software there is. Yeah, so I think I was probably a nightmare for my editor, Paul, but he was brilliant and he was very patient with
But I guess to be fair though, Olivia, you've spent so long, so many months and a couple of years, to be fair, filming this. It must have been quite hard to let go and then sort of have to sit next to someone else and let the editor like take the lead a little bit.
Yeah, but he did, and his experience, just absolutely served me well. But it was just so weird. There were so many ideas of things that I wanted to do to try and make it a bit more creative or stylistic and not follow the traditional route. But the story is what the story is, and it always ends up just worming its way back to the truth and the chronology as it should be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, fast forward to now then, I mean, what are some of the key things that you've learned from making the documentary that you'll hopefully be carrying forward into the future onto your future projects?
That's such a hard question. I think less team is more in the filming room. I think I'll always really try and push to only be the one in the room for those really crucial moments. That just might be a thing that I do like, as in that might be a personal preference. It doesn't work for everyone, but I think that was a massive thing for me. I mean, what else? I think one of the things that I really learned, this is a bit more general, is that I thought that there was so much I had to learn about how a film is made. I literally thought that there was a formula that everyone works with that I wasn't privy to yet, and I was really excited to be part of that. So like when it came to the music, thought I was going to learn so much more about how, like, the music side of things, and I ended up actually being led, and what my producers ended up liking more and was best suited to the film, loads of stuff that I'd pulled myself from the music libraries over the year, just because I love doing that. I'm led by music so much in terms of my imagination and how I visualize scenes. I almost always start with the music. And it was so simple. And actually, basically what I'm trying to say is, you think that there's so much mystery around all of these industries, and there's actually not. And I didn't have any shame in putting my hands up and saying, I don't know what that means. Can you please tell me? Even though if I'm an idiot, because I should know, because I was calling myself a director. But you've literally got to start from somewhere.
In the screening room, when Andy was in there and he was watching the documentary for the first time in its entirety, I mean, what was his feedback? What did he say? Because you mentioned that when you were in there, you didn't even really want to watch it, but you were kind of looking for his reactions.
So Andy didn't watch the film until it premiered to the public.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he didn't request a private screening or a little heads up, or he's got a lot of faith in you, Olivia. That is pure faith.
I mean, his wife, who I'm really close to, Kim, she saw it a few times before, but she only saw it twice before in the course of the whole of the edit, which lasted about 9 months.
Yeah.
Because they wanted it to be real and raw and honest, and that's literally what I did. I didn't cut anything out. I didn't shave anything away. I didn't make anything seem like like different than it was, and they were committed to that all the way through. And I'm so glad that Andy didn't see it, because he is so pedantic and pernickety, as you can probably tell if you've watched the film or know anything about him, that he would have ripped it apart, and it like I wouldn't have been able to have told his story. And when he did watch it, he do you know, I don't actually know. I tell you, this Christmas my husband got me a poster, and Andy signed it from the film, so I can hang it up on the wall, which means a lot to me. It's a really nice thing to have. And he wrote, thanks for doing an amazing job with my story, or something. And that's actually the first time I've actually heard
a bit of feedback.
Because in the post premiere interview, he told the journalist that had he known it was going to end up being, the film was going to end up being what it was, he wouldn't have gone through with it, which is completely fair. But obviously not what you want to hear. I'm
kind of thinking that maybe he purposefully didn't want to watch the film before it came out then, because he knew full well that he would probably pick it to pieces and kind of like maybe even spoil it for you and all your efforts and hard work that have gone into it. I don't know, I'm guessing, but
I mean, I doubt we would have released it genuinely if he'd seen it. Yeah.
So just to finish off then, Olivia, just tell us about some future projects that you're working on and developing. Obviously we can't do a lot at the moment because we're in a second or third lockdown, should I say, but now is all about planning stuff and getting stuff lined up, obviously, for later on in the year. So what can we look out for?
I mean, nothing, actually.
Do we need to injure Andy's hip again or something? We need a sequel.
No, if anyone's looking for a direct, no, I'm joking. I am currently working in development with the same producer, John Batzek, and another team that just released an incredible film on Netflix. And I actually can't say any more than that, which is really annoying.
No, you've said enough. I mean, I'm looking forward to whatever this is.
So fingers crossed, because it's yet to officially be financed, but I'm very hopeful, and we're quite confident about it as a team. So in two years, maybe you can look out for something.
But I mean, how are you feeling about having to follow up such a monumental documentary? I mean, are you putting any pressure on yourself? Do you feel any pressure? Or do you kind of feel like that's such an isolated, like, individual film that it kind of even doesn't relate to the rest of what you do, like the rest of your career, if that makes sense?
No, I'm absolutely terrified. But I wonder whether I'm kind of fooling myself that I need to put myself under all this pressure in order to make me work hard and do. I mean, not that I'd ever be complacent, because I absolutely love my job, and I'm so grateful that actually that project wasn't a one-off.
Yeah.
And that I now officially get to call myself a director, because I still, even when I was doing the film, I was like, I'm literally fooling people by ridiculous. I don't get that credit. So now it's quite cool that I get to say that I am. But yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna have the filming relationship that I had with Andy with anyone else, which is such a shame. So I'll have to find something different, something new.
But that makes it all the more special, though, surely, you know.
Yeah. No, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, I'm going to keep my eyes peeled for what you do next, Olivia, but I really appreciate your time tonight, during another lockdown. So it's been really, fascinating to hear your journey, just as much as Andy's journey throughout, the whole Resurfacing project. And if anyone out there that's listening to this hasn't seen it yet, make sure you get onto Amazon Prime and give it a watch, because you don't have to be a tennis fan. As long as you're a sports fan, you will appreciate this. And it's a really, really fascinating documentary. But I'm not going to give anything else away for anyone else that hasn't seen it. So make sure you get on Prime and give it a watch. It's a really inspiring film. And Olivia, all the best for the future.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries, Olivia. You take care.
You too.